Okay, we left off in the last video session. We were talking about algebraic expressions and the terminology. I want to kind of continue in the same vein, talk about terminology a little bit, just some general notes so we can get to the next item. So one of the things I want to talk about is how we handle multiplication in algebra. If you have 3x, okay, that means 3 times x. Remember, 3 times Mr. Unknown, Mr. X. But there's nothing in between that. How do we know it's multiplication? Well, because there's nothing in between there. We can do that with variables and put nothing in between there, and that means times. All the other things are obvious. 3 divided by x, x divided by 3, 3 plus x, x plus 3, minus 3. All of that is obvious, but not multiplication. Because the multiplication sign is also x. So if you try to write it 3 times x, look how confusing that is. You don't know what that means. You don't know if it means 3 times x or really 3 times x. So we just eliminate that. There's another way we can do it illustrated, and that's 3 times x. We can put a dot there. That means 3 times x. We can use parentheses, 3 times x, okay? And most of these, you don't need any of this when you're just involved with a variable and a constant. Where it becomes confusing is when you're doing numbers, okay? If you're doing numbers, if you're doing 3 times 2, is that 3 times 2 or is that 3 times x times 2? You really don't know. If you've got x times y, if you wrote it x times y, that looks like x times y. So it gets really confusing. So we've just eliminated the x altogether. We will not use a times sign for multiplication because it gets too confusing. So what we can use some other things. We can use nothing if it's as I said, it's 3y. That's 3 times y, and that's pretty self-explanatory. However, if we're doing numbers, we don't want to use 3 times 2 because, again, that looks like 3 times x times 2. It's a little bit confusing. So what we use instead of that is we can use a dot, 3 times 2. And that means the same thing as 3. It is 3 times 2. We can use parentheses, 3 times 2. And that parentheses can go either way. You can say 3 times 2. That means the same thing. Or you can put 2 parentheses. It doesn't matter. It's all multiplication. 3 times 2, 3 times 2, 3 times 2. But not 3 times 2 because that looks like 32. So when you put nothing, it has to be a variable involved. If you're going to put no sign in there at all, it has to be a variable or an unknown or a letter involved. That can be 3 times y. In algebra, that can't be 3 times 2. That's just 32. 3 times 2 has got to look like one of these. Occasionally, you'll still see the times sign, but rarely will you see that in algebra. So now we've got that cleared up. We know what that means. Now let's talk about some more terminology. I want to talk about powers, exponents. Okay? Let's talk about that. Raising to a power. I can't tell you how many students come to me believing that 3 to the second power means 3 times 2. I said I wasn't going to do that. 3 times 2. It doesn't. If I wanted to say 3 times 2, I would say 3 times 2. I wouldn't say it this way. Okay? If I want to say 2 to the fourth power, that does not mean 2 times 4. Did it again, didn't it? 2 times 4. That does not mean that, okay? if I wanted to write 2 times 4, I would have written it like this so it's plain. This up here means the number of times I'm multiplying 2 times itself. I'm doing it 4 times. It's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's what it means. And that's a whole different thing than 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay? So just be aware of what powers mean. It's multiplying times itself. Okay? So if I say 3 to the 3rd power, it's 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. Okay, so we've kind of got that. Don't make that mistake. You may, but remember that you're going to be wrong every time you do that. Don't make the mistake of saying that means 4 times 2, 2 times 4. Okay. If you're going to say, look at this, if you're going to say 3 times 3x to the 4th power, what does that mean? That means 3 times x to the 4th power. 3 times x to the 4th power. If you're going to say 5z squared plus 6, okay? That's 5 times z to the 2nd power plus 6. Okay. If you're gonna get real complicated, 1/2 a plus. Now, if I'm going to say this, I'm going to say 1/2 a, 1/2 times a, which is 1/2 of a, plus 6 times b divided by 7, or 6 times b over 7. Remember, fractions are always division problems. Fractions are ratios. 1 out of 2, 6 out of 7. And they're also division problems. 1 divided by 2. 1 out of 2, or 1 divided by 2. If you take 1 and put it in your handy dandy calculator and divide by 2, you're going to get 0.5. Well, that's just another way of saying a half. 1/2 is 0.5. It's a decimal equivalent of 1/2. Okay. And we're going to use that a lot, and I'm going to show you how to simplify working with fractions that way. This one, you'd say 6 divided by 7 times b. But you could do that on your calculator. You could 6 divided by 7, and it's going to come out to be a fraction times whatever b is. But the nomenclature to say this, 1/2 times a plus 6 times b over 7, or 1/2 of a plus the quotient of 6 times b and 7. Quotient meaning division, meaning the answer when you divide things. So you're dividing 6 times b by 7. So the quotient of 6 times b and 7. That means you're dividing 6 times b. Don't get hung up on that. We're going to get into that later. Don't worry about that. We're going to make that easier. I'm just giving you examples. Okay, I don't want to confuse you. I don't want to make you frustrated already. So don't worry about that. I'll take care of that. I'll take care of teaching you that. Okay, let's talk about some more nomenclature now. I think we're talking about decimals. We're into decimals. Let's talk about some more nomenclature. I'm going to write not decimals, exponents. Let's talk about exponents. Let's say 3x to the 4th power. Okay, so no, let's make it something a little simpler than that. Let's just make it x to the 4th power. I want to talk about terminology. The x is known as the base. Anything that is being raised to a power is known as the base. Okay, and the other number, the little number at the top, is known as the exponent. Or power. You can call that the power if you want to. But you need to know, if you were to write 3 to the 4th power, then 3 is the base, and 4 is the exponent, or the power. You're raising it to the 4th power. So you need to know that terminology, because later on we're going to get into some things where they talk about things having the same base and how to solve, and different bases, how to solve that. So you need to know that a base is the big item, and the little item is the exponent. The little number is the exponent. Okay, some other things, some other terminology you may need to know. You probably know this, but I'm just going to review it anyway. Here we go. These are just some words. When you hear these words, you know you're talking about addition. Sum, that's what you get when you add numbers together. More than, when you see in a word problem more than, you know that they're talking about adding. Plus, obviously adding, increased by, or added to. All of those are adding. Subtraction is difference. The difference in two numbers is the difference is the answer you get when you subtract one number from another. The difference in two numbers, you're subtracting the second number away from the first. The difference in 5 and 3 means 5 minus 3. Okay. Less than, minus, subtracted from, decreased by. All of those are hints to tell you that there's subtraction going on. There's another one, multiply. Product. When you multiply two numbers together, the answer is the product. Product times of. 2/3 of 7. That means 2/3 times 7, and I'm going to cover how to figure that in a little bit. Divide is quotient. When you divide two numbers, the quotient of 6 and 3 is 6 divided by 3, which is 2. The quotient of 6 and 3 is 2. Okay, that's the answer you get when you divide. Okay, let's stop there. I want you to go, when you get out of this, go to the next assignment, and there will be some check understanding questions. Answer those questions, and then let's come back to the next video that's on the page.